You see, Jesus time and time again does things like this, where he changes the story. So it's no longer about the least of these. It's about stepping into roles and letting people know that they are cared for and that they are loved. And he does that in so many different ways as he serves his disciples and the other people around him. Blessed to be a blessing. That's the sermon series we're in right now. And if you've been with us the last couple of weeks, we've talked about kind of stewardship of finances and of other blessings. In the next 2 weeks, I want to dive in just a little bit more on some specific areas of being a blessing, because we are blessed to be a blessing. And today, I want to look at what it means to serve. And specifically, the why of serving, and then we're going to get into some specifics of how we can serve. But the why of serving kind of came to mind because as I was sitting down with people for coffees and lunches and other things, I started to ask the question, when you hear the word serving, what comes to mind? And my host and hostesses, while I was out, often said, well, I am serving, right? I am serving you. It is a job. I have to pay my bills. It is just what I do. Now, some of them did that with compassion and empathy, and they were very connective and relational. Others, it is just strictly, this is what I do to get by. Then other people who are probably a little bit more on a sporting side of things thought about volleyball. Now, that doesn't have to do with anything that we're going to talk about, right? But it's what comes to mind for people. Then I had the blessing of sitting down with some veterans. And they talked about serving as in what they did during their career in the military. And some of them felt compelled to serve as just giving back to the country that's given so much to them. Some of them felt compulsory, that they had to do it. Others kind of said, well, you know what? I didn't have any other options. It's just what fit. And so they spent their 4 years serving. And so there's so many different things that come to mind when we think about serving. And a lot of them have to do with self, have to do with like me and what I can do or what I have done. That's not really where we're going to go today. Right? So I want to take a minute and just define what serving is, especially as we look at 2 Corinthians and Paul's letter and his kind of talk on generosity. And Paul, we've kind of looked at 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 over the last couple of weeks. We're going to stay there this week and next week as well. But as we look at the word serving and we break that down into its origin, it really means people work, right? How is it that we work with people? And Paul kind of talks about this in supplying the needs of the saints, right? And so what does it mean for us, and why do we do people work? Why do we serve alongside one another and for one another? Well, I think one of the reasons that we do that is to gain perspective. Because if we see serving as all about me, then we're very narrowly focused on what's in front of us. And if you're like me and you get narrowly focused, that's where anxiety tends to come into the picture. Now, as I talk about perspective, I want you to hear that it is not something that oftentimes gets talked about when we talk about stewardship and generosity, not in our church, but in the church at large, and that would be, it is not the prosperity gospel, right? Pastor Goff mentioned this last week just kind of briefly, but I want to say that really this is where you hear televangelists say, if you give to the church, your bank account is going to be blessed, and you will be prosperous because of what you have given, especially financially. That's not what we read in the Bible. What we read is that because of the blessings that we have been given, we are to go and bless others. So it starts with where we're at and how we've been blessed, not financially, but really with an empty tomb and the hope that comes from that. And we see that as we look at Paul and his writings to the church in Corinth. And one of the ways we see that and that he talks about perspective is through Thanksgiving. Now, if you've seen a counselor or you've had to cope with different kind of mental health crisis, you know that oftentimes one of the coping mechanisms they start with is Thanksgiving, because it really does change your brain chemistry so that you can gain perspective and see what it is that you've been blessed with. And Paul, I think, realized that. Now, he probably didn't equate it to psychology and all of the studies that we have today. But what we see is, as we begin to form thoughts around Thanksgiving and being thankful, we see that we are blessed in so many different ways. And one of those ways is to be a loved and forgiven child of God that brings a hope into our lives. And as we gain that perspective, we see the why as the people work, as the serving that we're tasked with, right? Not because we have to, but because we're blessed to. We also see within the scripture that it's a very personal thing. That as we do the people work, as we serve, and we are a blessing to people, it is very personal. And we get an example of this as Jesus pours water in a basin. He takes a towel and he wraps it around himself. And he kneels down and he begins to wash the disciples' feet. Now, the disciples did not have shoes like we have that covered their whole feet. They had sandals. And so the dust and the muck and all the things that were out and about were on their feet. And so this job was really reserved for the youngest girl who was a servant of those days. So here Jesus is taking on a role of the least of these as an example of how to serve. And you can only imagine what is going through Peter's head as he bends down to wash his feet. That'd be extremely awkward because it's so personal and it's not what was expected. You see, Jesus time and time again does things like this where he changes the story. So it's no longer about the least of these. It's about stepping into roles and letting people know that they are cared for and that they are loved. And he does that in so many different ways as he serves his disciples and the other people around him. And he goes on to say it's not just about the personal, it's also about the community, right? If I've done this for you, now you are to go and wash one another's feet. That you are in this together, that as a body of believers, this people work is for you. And we see that Jesus, stepping into the role of someone who is washing feet, gives us an example of humble leadership, but also humble serving. What that means and how it connects everyone. Because as he does that, it's not kind of picking this person and that person, but he's saying, you are all in need of a foot washing, and here I am to serve all of you. And so as you go, serve those around you. I think the other thing that we see through the scriptures, and if we look at Paul and his writings to Corinth and to other churches, is that God has really uniquely gifted us to be us. We don't have the same giftings as each other. And so God has also given us in that passion for different opportunities that present themselves. That God takes what he has made us to be, and in the blessings that he has given us, he has blessed us with kind of different serving opportunities as well. And we heard some of those from Celine as she talked about the different opportunities that are around the church that serve the body of believers. And some of you may be sitting and saying, I don't know what my giftings are. I don't know how God has blessed me to be uniquely me. Well, catch Celine or I. We have different tools, and we have some coaching that we can do to help you find those points of passion and get you connected in, right? And this isn't just about St. Michael, but this goes further into the world around us and finding those spots where you can do the people work, that you can serve because you've been blessed so much. But I am going to say, if you are a guest with us today, you can tune me out for a couple minutes, okay? Don't go to sleep, though, please. But here's the thing. We have different opportunities in our midst. And back in April, we changed our governance here at St. Michael. So we began to look at how ministry can happen not by the staff that's here and having them kind of do all of the things, but how can we form teams to fulfill the ministry of the church? How can we form teams that are actually doing the work of being God's hands and feet to each other and to the world around us? And so my hope is that you've been able to see our new website. We launched this kind of right after we went through all of that processing. And as we did that, we wanted it to be a tool for people to get connected into opportunities. We wanted it to be something that you could go to and you could say, oh, hey, look, I've been gifted to be a decorator. Or I've been gifted to be able to do some work on buildings. Or I've been gifted to greet people. And then find out who leads that and how you can get connected into it. So if you go to our homepage, you're going to see this top bar up there. That Discover St. Michael, you scroll on that, it's going to give you a drop-down menu. One of those options is ministry teams. And this is what that page looks like. And Celine, who is our director of belonging and is an excellent connection on working on getting people connected to leaders, to ministry teams, so they can be hands and feet, came up with this hard copy of what's on that website that shares what teams we have and where we're going. Because we want you to be involved. And not out of compulsion, not saying, hey, everyone at St. Michael, you have to be a part of a team. But realizing that we have been blessed to be a blessing, that we have the knowledge of being a loved and forgiven child of God and a hope that brings into our lives. And as we do that, we've been blessed to be a blessing to share that hope. We share it with each other here in this community through those opportunities and through those teams. We share it with the world around us as we go out from here and we serve in other capacities as well. It doesn't just happen here within the church. Those are just some of the opportunities we wanted to share with you. But my hope is that as you go through this week, that you realize how blessed you are. Not because you're so great, but because God is. And that through Jesus and his examples that he sets time and time again in the Gospels, we see what it means to be loved and forgiven children of God and to have a hope. And that through that you see what it means to be blessed, to be a blessing, and to share that hope with the world around you. Amen.